there is a sound that, for a generation, became the heartbeat of a war. A sound that could mean life or death. A sound that echoed through the valleys and over the rice paddies of a nation divided. It was the sound of the jungle itself being torn open. It was the sound of salvation and the sound of fury. This was the sound of the Bell UH-1 Iroquois, a machine so iconic, so ubiquitous, that its official name was almost forgotten. To the soldiers who flew in it, who fought from it, and who were saved by it, it had only one name: the Huey. The Vietnam War was a conflict that redefined warfare. It was a war without clear front lines, fought in dense jungles and sprawling deltas where conventional armies struggled to gain a foothold. In this brutal, unforgiving landscape, victory wasn't measured in miles gained, but in control of the terrain, in the ability to move troops, supply them, and bring them back out alive. It was a war of mobility, and the Huey was its undisputed king. Before the Huey, the helicopter was a promising but unproven piece of technology. It was seen as fragile, mechanically complex, and limited in its capabilities. The Korean War had shown its potential for medical evacuation, but no one could have predicted the sheer scale of its future deployment. Vietnam changed everything. The Huey transformed the helicopter from a simple transport vehicle into the single most important and versatile weapon system of the war. It was a troop transport, a flying ambulance, a supply truck, and a fearsome gunship. It ferried soldiers into the heart of enemy territory on daring combat assaults, a tactic that came to be known as air mobility. It swooped into the chaos of battle to evacuate the wounded, giving rise to the term dust-off, a call sign that promised a fighting chance at survival. A soldier wounded in the jungle had a better chance of making it to a hospital than someone in a car crash on a highway back home, all because of the Huey. And then there was its dark side. When the war demanded more firepower, the Huey was transformed. Bolted with rocket pods and machine guns, it became a gunship, a flying predator that could rain down hellfire on enemy positions with terrifying precision. It protected the troop carriers, softened up landing zones, and provided close air support for the grunts on the ground. It became, without a doubt, the deadliest machine in Vietnam. Over 7,000 Hueys served in the conflict. They flew an astonishing 36 million sorties. The sheer numbers are hard to comprehend. But behind every one of those flights, behind the noise and the chaos, was a story of human ingenuity and vision. This revolutionary machine didn't just appear out of thin air. It wasn't designed by a committee or born from a government spreadsheet. It was the culmination of a singular vision, the life's work of one man. A man who wasn't a soldier or a weapons designer in the traditional sense. He was a poet, a philosopher, and a brilliant, almost eccentric, inventor who dreamed of mastering vertical flight. He saw the helicopter not as a weapon, but as a tool for humanity. Yet, in the crucible of war, his creation was forged into one of the most effective instruments of combat ever devised. This is the story of that man and the team he led. It's the story of how a simple, elegant design philosophy gave birth to the Bell UH-1 Huey. It's the story of the engineer who, in his quest to conquer the sky, unintentionally made the helicopter the deadliest machine in the Vietnam War. His name was Arthur Middleton Young, and his story is as remarkable as the machine he created. To understand the Huey, you must first understand the mind of its creator. Arthur Middleton Young was not your typical engineer. His journey into the world of aeronautics was not driven by a fascination with engines or a desire to build weapons, but by a deep, philosophical quest to understand the universe and his place within it. He was a thinker, a dreamer, an artist, and a mathematician, and it was this unique blend of disciplines that allowed him to solve a problem that had stumped inventors for centuries. Born in 1905 in Paris to American parents, Arthur grew up surrounded by art and culture. His father was a respected landscape painter, and his mother a musician. From an early age, Young was encouraged to explore the world not just through scientific principles, but through intuition and aesthetics. He studied mathematics at Princeton University, but his true passions lay elsewhere. He was fascinated by the intersection of science, philosophy, and the abstract. He spent his early years exploring yoga, astrology, and the theories of Carl Jung, searching for a unifying theory of process, a way to understand how things evolve and change in the universe. For Jung, the helicopter became the physical embodiment of this philosophical quest. He saw it as a process symbol. It was a machine that could defy gravity, that could move with a freedom no other vehicle could. It could hover, motionless, yet full of dynamic energy. It could ascend and descend vertically, move forwards, backwards, and sideways. To him, it was a metaphor for consciousness itself, a being of complete freedom. In the 1930s, the helicopter was still a pipe dream for most. The challenge was immense, the problem of torque. A single rotor spinning in one direction would cause the body of the helicopter to spin wildly in the opposite direction, a basic principle of physics, Newton's third law. Early designers tried to counteract this with complex, multi-rotor systems, but these were heavy, inefficient, and a pilot's nightmare. The other great challenge was control. How do you steer a machine that is being held aloft by a giant spinning wing? How do you tilt it, stabilize it, and keep it from tearing itself apart? Arthur Young believed the answer lay not in brute force or mechanical complexity, but in elegance and simplicity. In 1928 he had left his job and retreated to his family farm with a singular goal: to build a working helicopter. For over a decade, he worked in near isolation, funding his experiments with his own inheritance. He filled notebooks not just with equations, but with philosophical musings and intricate drawings. He started small, building remote-controlled models powered by electric motors. This was his genius. While others were building full-sized machines that would crash and burn, costing fortunes and risking lives, Young could test his theories quickly and safely. He could observe the subtle forces at play, making tiny adjustments and iterating on his designs day after day. Through this meticulous process, he had a breakthrough. It was a moment of profound insight that would change the course of aviation history. His key invention was the stabilizer bar. It was a simple, weighted bar attached to the rotor hub, perpendicular to the two main rotor blades. This bar acted like a gyroscope. As the rotor spun, the stabilizer bar remained stable in its plane of rotation, creating a fixed reference point. Through a system of linkages, it would automatically adjust the pitch of the rotor blades, correcting for any unwanted wobbles or gusts of wind. It was, in essence, a simple mechanical autopilot. It tamed the inherent instability of the helicopter, making it possible for a human to actually fly it. His second stroke of genius was embracing simplicity in the rotor itself. Instead of a rigid, multi-bladed system, Young perfected the two-bladed teetering or seesaw rotor. The two blades were connected to the hub with a central pivot, like a seesaw. This allowed the blades to flap up and down in response to aerodynamic forces, automatically balancing themselves out. It was elegant, lightweight, and mechanically simple. It was a system that worked with the forces of flight rather than fighting against them. By 1941, with the world at war, the military's interest in helicopters was growing. Young knew his invention was ready. He packed up his best model and a film of it in flight, and went looking for a partner. After being turned away by other companies, he found a receptive ear in Lawrence "Larry" Bell, the founder of Bell Aircraft. Bell was a risk-taker, a visionary in his own right, who had built his company on innovative fighter planes like the P-39 Airacobra. Larry Bell watched Young's film, saw the incredible stability of the model, and immediately recognized its potential. He reportedly told his engineers, "I don't care what you think. We're going to hire this man and build his helicopter." Bell gave Young a small team and a secluded corner of his factory in Gardenville, New York. On November 18, 1941, Arthur Young signed a contract with Bell Aircraft, and the Bell Helicopter Company was effectively born. Within 2 years, Young and his team had built their first full-scale prototype, the Bell Model 30. And on December 29, 1942, with Young himself, nervously observing, it lifted off the ground for the first time. The Model 30 was a success, leading directly to the Bell Model 47, the first helicopter ever certified for commercial use. You might recognize it from the opening credits of the TV show MASH. It was a triumph of Young's design philosophy. It was stable, reliable, and relatively easy to fly. But Arthur Young wasn't finished. His core principles, the stabilizer bar, the two-bladed teetering rotor, the focus on simplicity and stability, were the DNA of something much bigger to come. The world was changing, and the demands of the military were evolving. The Army needed a new kind of aircraft, one that could carry troops into battle, powered not by a piston engine, but by a revolutionary new power source, the gas turbine. The stage was set for Young and his team at Bell to create their masterpiece. The Bell 47 was a marvel. It had proven Arthur Young's design philosophy to the world and had become the workhorse of the Korean War, saving thousands of lives as a medical evacuation helicopter. But as the 1950s dawned, the winds of change were blowing through the world of aviation. A new technology was poised to make the piston engine obsolete, the gas turbine. Turbine engines were a revolution. They were incredibly powerful for their size and weight. A piston engine generated power through a series of controlled explosions in heavy cylinders, creating vibration and a complex mechanical chain to deliver power. A turbine, on the other hand, was conceptually simpler. It drew in air, compressed it, ignited it with fuel to create a continuous blast of hot gas, and used that gas to spin a turbine. The result was a dramatic increase in horsepower with a fraction of the weight and far less vibration. For helicopter designers, this was the holy grail. Less weight meant more lifting capacity. More power meant better performance, especially in the hot and high conditions that could cripple a piston engine aircraft. The U.S. Army, having learned hard lessons in Korea, knew exactly what it wanted. It needed a single aircraft that could do it all, a utility helicopter. In 1954, the Army issued a requirement for a new generation of helicopter. The specifications were demanding. It had to be a jack of all trades. It needed to be able to carry 6 soldiers or a payload of 800 pounds. It had to be capable of serving as a medical evacuation helicopter, able to carry 2 litters, and a medic. It needed to be reliable, easy to maintain in the field, and most importantly, it had to be powered by a turbine engine. This new machine would be the cornerstone of the Army's emerging air mobility doctrine, the idea of using helicopters to move troops and supplies, bypassing difficult terrain and enemy strongpoints. At Bell, Arthur Young's team was ready. While Young himself was transitioning into a more consultative role, his design DNA was deeply embedded in the company's engineering culture. The team, now led by a group of talented engineers who had learned from the master, saw the Army's requirement as the perfect opportunity to scale up their proven concepts. They knew the core of their design was sound. The two-bladed teetering rotor system was lightweight and aerodynamically efficient. The gyroscopic stabilizer bar provided unparalleled stability. Now they could pair this elegant rotor system with the immense power and light weight of a brand-new engine, the Lycoming T-53 turboshaft. The Lycoming T-53 was a game-changer. It was a compact powerhouse, capable of producing over 700 shaft horsepower, a significant leap over the piston engines of the day. Its design allowed the Bell team to create a helicopter with a large, open cabin. Unlike piston-driven helicopters that had the bulky engine located in the center of gravity, the turbine could be mounted above and behind the cabin. This single design choice was revolutionary. It gave the new helicopter, designated the Bell Model 204, a cavernous, unobstructed interior space. It was like a flying van. The floor was flat. The large sliding doors on either side meant that troops could get in and out in seconds. For medevac, it could easily accommodate stretchers without a complex loading process. The cockpit was placed at the front with excellent visibility, and the single pilot sat alongside space for a co-pilot or passenger. It was a design born from practicality. The prototype, given the military designation XH-40, took to the skies for the first time in October 1956. From the very beginning, it was clear that Bell had a winner. The helicopter was fast, powerful, and remarkably smooth, thanks to the combination of the turbine engine and Young's rotor system. The Army was impressed. After a rigorous competition against other manufacturers, Bell's Model 204 was declared the victor in 1957. The production version was officially designated the HU-1, which stood for Helicopter Utility, and it was this designation that gave it the name that would become legend. Soldiers, in their typical fashion for creating slang, simply started calling it the Huey. The name was so popular, so fitting, that even when the Department of Defense changed its designation system in 1962, renaming the aircraft the UH-1, the name Huey stuck. Bell even formally trademarked the name and cast it onto the helicopter's anti-torque pedals. But the Huey that first entered service was not yet the machine that would dominate the skies of Vietnam. It was a stepping stone. Initial feedback from pilots and crews led to a series of rapid improvements. The cabin was stretched to accommodate more troops, from 6 to 8, and eventually to 10. The engine was upgraded, providing even more power. The main rotor blades were made longer and wider, giving the helicopter more lift. This evolved version, the UH-1D, became the definitive Slick, the troop transport that would carry millions of soldiers into battle. With a crew of 4, a pilot, co-pilot, crew chief, and door gunner, it could carry a full infantry squad of 9 men. It was the workhorse, the bus, the truck, the ambulance. It was the backbone of air mobility. The sound it made was unique. The combination of the powerful T-53 turbine engine and the 2-bladed rotor system, which was designed to have the blade tips break the sound barrier, created a deep, resonant whoomp-whoomp that could be heard for miles. It was a sound that would soon become synonymous with the war itself. The machine was born. Arthur Young's vision, combined with the power of the turbine and the needs of a new kind of army, had created the perfect tool. Now it was heading to a place that would test it, and the men who flew it, to the absolute limit. The Huey was going to war. In 1962, the first Bell UH-1 Hueys arrived in South Vietnam. They were assigned to an Army transportation company, and their initial mission was straightforward: to provide mobility and logistical support to the South Vietnamese Army. At the time, no one, not even the most forward-thinking military strategist, could have fully grasped the revolutionary impact these machines were about to have. Vietnam was a country with few roads, dense jungles, and waterlogged deltas, a landscape that seemed designed to swallow armies whole. It was here that the Huey would not just change the rules of engagement, it would create an entirely new game. Before the Huey, the war was fought at the pace of a foot soldier. A unit could spend days marching through grueling terrain to reach an objective, arriving exhausted and often too late. The Viet Cong and North Vietnamese Army were masters of this environment. They used the jungle for cover, moving like ghosts, choosing the time and place of every engagement. They controlled the battlefield because they controlled the terrain. The Huey changed that in an instant. Suddenly, the impossible terrain was no longer an obstacle, it was simply something to fly over. This new capability gave birth to the defining tactic of the Vietnam War, the airmobile assault. The concept was audacious. An entire battalion of infantry could be lifted from their base, flown over miles of enemy-controlled territory, and inserted directly into a landing zone, or LZ'd, deep in the jungle. They could strike anywhere, at any time. The enemy's greatest ally, the jungle itself, was neutralized. The slow, grinding pace of infantry warfare was replaced by the speed of a rotor blade. The 1st Cavalry Division, Airmobile, which arrived in Vietnam in 1965, was the ultimate expression of this new doctrine. With over 400 helicopters, most of them Hueys, the 1st Cav could move its troops and artillery anywhere in its area of operations in a matter of hours. The war had become three-dimensional. Perhaps the Huey's most profound impact was not on tactics, but on morale. It was the promise of a second chance. The call sign "Dust-Off" became a prayer on the lips of every soldier. It was the designation for medical evacuation helicopters, and their crews were legendary for their courage. A dust-off pilot would fly into any situation, no matter how dangerous, to retrieve the wounded. The statistics are staggering. During the Vietnam War, a wounded soldier who made it onto a dust-off helicopter had a greater than 98% chance of survival. This was unprecedented in the history of warfare. The golden hour, the critical first hour after being wounded, could be beaten. A man could be hit in the deepest part of the jungle and be on an operating table in a fully equipped hospital within 30 minutes. The Huey wasn't just a weapon, it was a guardian angel. The sound of its approach was, for countless soldiers, the sound of life itself. The Huey was also the lifeline. In a war without front lines, remote fire bases and outposts were constantly at risk of being surrounded and cut off. The Huey was their connection to the outside world. It brought the essentials: food, water, and ammunition. But it also brought mail from home, a luxury that could make the difference between hope and despair. The helicopter was the umbilical cord that kept the army alive and fighting. It could deliver artillery pieces to remote hilltops, creating instant fire bases. It could extract reconnaissance teams from deep behind enemy lines. It could do anything. But this new form of warfare created new dangers. The helicopter was a powerful tool, but it was also vulnerable. Concentrating dozens of helicopters into a small landing zone for a combat assault was a recipe for disaster if the enemy was waiting. The Viet Cong and NVA quickly learned to listen for the sound of the Hueys and prepare a deadly reception. Pilots and crews described flying into a hot LZ as a knife fight in a phone booth. They were flying low and slow, presenting a perfect target. The enemy would open up with a hail of machine gun fire and rocket-propelled grenades. The troop-carrying Hueys, nicknamed Slicks, because of their relatively clean external appearance, were armed with only 2 M60 machine guns, one on each side, manned by the crew chief and a door gunner. Their job was to suppress the enemy fire just long enough for the infantry to get out. It was a brutal, terrifying job. The average life expectancy of a door gunner in a hot combat zone was said to be just a few weeks. The helicopters themselves, while rugged, were not invincible. The sound of the rotors could give away their approach, and a single well-aimed shot could bring one down. It became clear very quickly that the Slicks needed protection. They needed an escort. They needed a hunter to kill the wolves that were preying on the flock. The answer, once again, was the Huey itself. In a remarkable display of field-expedient innovation and official development, Arthur Young's versatile machine was about to be transformed. The gentle workhorse was about to grow teeth. The deadliest version of the helicopter was about to be born, not on a drafting table in Texas, but in the crucible of combat in Vietnam. The gunship had arrived. The airmobile assault was a brilliant but flawed concept. The troop-carrying Hueys, the Slicks, were flying into a buzzsaw. They were most vulnerable in the final seconds of their approach, low, slow, and committed to landing. The Viet Cong and NVA became adept at setting up deadly ambushes in and around these landing zones. The Slicks door gunners could lay down suppressive fire, but it often wasn't enough to silence the enemy machine guns and RPGs hidden in bunkers and spider holes. The cost in men and machines was mounting. The Army needed a way to clear the landing zones before the slicks arrived. They needed an aircraft that could fly alongside the transports, scout ahead, and unleash a torrent of firepower to suppress, disorient, and destroy the enemy. The solution was not to design a new helicopter from scratch, but to once again adapt the incredibly versatile Huey. This was the birth of the gunship. The first gunships were field modifications. In 1962, the Army began experimenting by strapping multiple machine guns and rocket pods onto its existing Hueys. The first dedicated gunship unit, the UTTH, Utility Tactical Transport Helicopter Company, arrived in Vietnam and immediately proved the concept's worth. These early gunships were a terrifying sight. Armed with 30 caliber machine guns and 2.75-inch rockets, they could circle a target and saturate it with fire. But these were just the beginning. As the war escalated, the gunship evolved into a truly fearsome weapon system. The airframe was the shorter, more nimble UH-1B and UH-1C models. These Charlie models had a more powerful engine and an improved rotor system designed for greater maneuverability, essential for a gunship that needed to dive and turn aggressively in combat. The armament became standardized and devastatingly effective. A typical UH-1C gunship, often called a hog if it was carrying a heavy rocket load, was a flying arsenal. The M156 universal mounts on each side could carry a variety of weapons. A common configuration included 2 pods, each containing 7 2.75-inch rockets for a total of 14. These rockets could be fired singly, in pairs, or in a single overwhelming salvo that could obliterate a bunker or a large section of the tree line. Alongside the rockets were the guns. The M60 machine guns were replaced by electrically powered M134 miniguns. The minigun was a modern marvel of destruction. A 6-barreled Gatling-style weapon, it could fire at a rate of up to 4,000 rounds per minute. The sound it made was not the staccato rat-tat-tat of a normal machine gun, but a horrifying, high-pitched buzz like a giant chainsaw tearing through the sky. A 1-second burst from a minigun would send over 60 rounds into a target. For even heavier firepower, some gunships were equipped with a 40mm grenade launcher in a nose-mounted turret. Nicknamed the Chunker for the sound it made, this weapon could lob explosive grenades with pinpoint accuracy, perfect for taking out enemy gun emplacements. With these new tools, a new tactic was born: the hunter-killer team. A typical airmobile assault was now a complex ballet of death. The formation was led by a pair of gunships, the Hunters. Their job was to fly in low and fast, deliberately trying to draw fire. The moment an enemy position revealed itself by shooting, the second gunship would roll in to attack, marking the target with smoke rockets. Then the rest of the gunship team would unleash hell. This team, often called a fire team, consisted of a light team of 2 gunships and a heavy team of 2 more. While the slicks full of infantry circled in a safe holding pattern high above, the gunships would prep the LZ. They would fly in, guns blazing, rockets screaming, in a coordinated assault designed to terrorize and annihilate any resistance. The contrast between the 2 types of Hueys was stark, and it created 2 distinct cultures. The slick crews saw themselves as the lifesavers, the bus drivers who went into the fire. Their call sign was often chalk, followed by their number in the formation. The gunship crews, with call signs like Cobra, Shark, or Gunslinger, were the protectors, the enforcers. But they were all part of the same team, flying the same basic airframe, a testament to Arthur Young's original design. The Huey's adaptability was its greatest strength. It was a blank canvas. The large cabin of the slick, designed for troops, could be filled with water blivets, ammunition crates, or medical stretchers. The stability and power that made it a good transport also made it a stable platform for launching rockets and firing guns. It was a machine that could be whatever the war needed it to be, on any given day. A slick could drop off a squad of infantry and, on its way back to base, get a call to pick up a wounded soldier. A gunship could finish its escort mission and then be diverted to provide close air support for a unit pinned down miles away. The line between these roles could blur in an instant. This constant adaptation turned the Huey into the undisputed symbol of the war. It was everywhere. It was the sound of the morning, bringing in supplies. It was the sound of the afternoon, launching a combat assault. And it was the sound of the night, providing life-saving medevac or raining fire down on an enemy attack. It was the deadliest machine in Vietnam, not just because of the weapons it carried, but because of its ubiquity. It brought the full, overwhelming force of American industrial might to bear on any point on the map, at any time. Arthur Young had designed a machine of unprecedented freedom and versatility. In the jungles of Vietnam, that freedom was translated into the power to project force, to save lives, and to take them with terrifying efficiency. The Huey had become two sides of the same coin, the angel of mercy and the angel of death. The last American troops left Vietnam in 1973. The war, which had defined a generation and torn a nation apart, was over. But the legacy of the machines and the people who fought in it endures. Of all the symbols of that conflict, the jungle, the rice paddies, the M16 rifle, none is more potent, more instantly recognizable than the Bell UH-1 Huey. It is impossible to tell the story of the Vietnam War without it. The numbers alone are a testament to its importance. Of the nearly 12,000 helicopters that served in Vietnam, over 7,000 were Hueys. They flew more than 36 million sorties, a figure that is almost impossible to fully comprehend. But the Huey's legacy cannot be measured in statistics alone. It is measured in the lives it saved, the battles it influenced, and the very way it changed the philosophy of warfare. The cost, however, was immense. The sky was a battlefield just as brutal as the ground. Nearly 5,000 helicopter crew members were killed in action in Vietnam. Almost half of all the Hueys that served there were lost. Behind each of those losses is a story of courage, of violence, and of sacrifice. The Huey was a symbol of power, but it was also a symbol of vulnerability. For every soldier it saved, there was a pilot, a crew chief, or a door gunner who flew into harm's way, knowing they might not come back. Their names are etched on this wall, a permanent reminder of the human price of air mobility. When the war ended, the Huey did not disappear. Its service was far from over. It became the workhorse for armies, air forces, and navies across the globe. It has flown in countless other conflicts and served in peacekeeping missions. It has been a tool for disaster relief, a platform for law enforcement, and a lifeline for emergency medical services. The same characteristics that made it so effective in Vietnam, its reliability, its versatility, its simple, rugged design, made it an invaluable tool for peace as well. Even today, upgraded and modernized versions of the Huey, like the UH-1Y Venom used by the U.S. Marine Corps, continue to fly, a direct descendant of Arthur Young's original vision. And what of the man who started it all? Arthur Young did not remain in the world of aviation. Having solved the problem that had captivated him for so long, he left Bell Helicopter in 1947, shortly after the success of his first commercial model, the Bell 47. He had achieved his goal of creating a machine of complete freedom, and he saw no reason to stay. He sold his patents to Bell for a modest sum and returned to his true passion, the study of philosophy and cosmology. He founded the Institute for the Study of Consciousness, dedicating the rest of his life to developing his theory of process, the very ideas that had first led him to the helicopter. He wrote books not on aerodynamics, but on mythology, evolution, and the nature of reality. It is one of history's great ironies. The man who designed the deadliest machine of the Vietnam War spent the war itself deep in meditation and philosophical inquiry, exploring the universe in a way that had nothing to do with combat. There is no evidence to suggest that Young ever expressed regret for how his invention was used, but one can only wonder what he thought. The helicopter, his process symbol for freedom and consciousness, had become an instrument of war, a bringer of life and a dealer of death in equal measure. His elegant solution to a complex problem, born from a desire to understand the universe, was put to use in one of the most chaotic and brutal conflicts of the 20th century. The story of the Huey is a story of unintended consequences. It's the story of a brilliant engineer, a team of dedicated innovators, and the brave soldiers who flew their creation into history. Arthur Young set out to build a machine that could defy gravity. He succeeded, and in doing so, he gave the world a tool. But a tool has no morality. In the hands of a desperate army, fighting a desperate war, that tool was forged into a weapon that changed the face of battle, saved thousands, and left an indelible mark on the soul of a nation. The engineer may have dreamed of the sky, but his machine would conquer the jungle.